Welcome back to Clash of Cultures as we continue our 2023 college football preview. Our next stop on this tour is the Baylor Bears. But before we get into football, like always, we want to just continue to thank all the people that have watched these videos, that have subscribed. If you're watching this now, please press the like button. Please subscribe. We appreciate you going on this journey with us. Like I said before, this is a passion project that me and my son just kind of took conversations that we were having, and we wanted to share them with you guys. So we appreciate everybody who's been along this ride with us. With that being said, Stephen, what's your thoughts on Baylor this year?
So Baylor. I'm gonna go ahead and just pull up their schedule now. I'm looking at it on my end, so if you guys are confused, I'm looking this way. So looking at their schedule from last year, they were not a good team. I mean, back when they did have Matt Rule, between the 2017, 2020, or 2019 seasons, they were competing for the Big 12. But I think this year they have a chance to do that again. I think they're coming in ranked to the number 23 overall team according to ESPN FPI, which is I feel like that's respectable for a team who went 6-6 last year.
6-6, yep.
7-6 after the bowl game. I'm sorry, 7-6 after the bowl game.
No, they lost their bowl game.
6-7. Then I apologize. 6-7 after the bowl game. But a lot of these games, as you guys can see, were close games. I mean, they lost in double overtime to BYU. They barely lost to West Virginia by 3. They lost to TCU. I think that's the game when a field goal TCU hit when they ran on the field really quick. So that was a close game. The Texas game was only a 2-possession game. So, I mean, a lot of these games were very close. They could have swung the other way. And I think this year we're going to see a difference in that. ESPN has a projected win-loss at 7-5, which seems – I mean, it could be a little low, but we'll get into their schedule later. And they only have a 3% chance to win the Big 12. In my eyes, the Big 12 is wide open. So Baylor only having a 3% chance is kind of low to me, especially when you have them ranked as the number 23 overall team. I feel like it's contradicting yourself unless you have, 5 teams ahead of them or 4 teams ahead of them in the Big 12, which I didn't even care to go look. But, I mean, I think when you look at the 3% margin, Baylor fans are going to say that's disrespectful, especially when you have them arguably a top 25 team. We haven't got the official polls, but arguably a top 25 team that's going to come into the country or come into the season. But what is your thoughts on their last season and kind of before we get into the roster, the preview for this season?
Yeah, I don't want to talk much about the roster as we're getting ready to pull it up. I think they're bringing back. So again, we talked about the record last year, but I think they're bringing back a lot of the key pieces that helped them be successful last year. So we could talk about Blake Sharpen. We could talk about Richard Reese, almost 1,000-yard rusher. I think they're bringing back a lot. Now, obviously, they lost some players too, but I also like the players they're bringing in from the transfer portal. So when you kind of mix those two on a team that I think at the end of the season, and like I said, I know they lost their bowl game, but some things started to come together. Again, do I think they're going to be in the national championship picture? No, I don't think that's going to happen. But again, to me, it's steps, right? And I think to get back into the national championship picture, there's steps. I think they make progress this year. I think they are better this year than they were last year. And like I said, part of that for me is just some of the pieces. They're bringing back key pieces. They are bringing back pieces that are going to help them be a good football team this year. What's your thoughts?
So when you look at key losses and key additions, as we have on the screen here, they're obviously losing a lot, but like you said, they are bringing a lot back in the transfer portal. But I would say the biggest concern to me is the offensive line. The reason why, they had 3 offensive linemen that were all first-team Big 12, and they lost all 3 of them. So, and that's in Jacob Gall, Connor Galvin, and Grant Miller. You do bring in the Barrington brothers from BYU. I believe Clark is the one that's a little bit better. I think he transferred over as a 4-star and Campbell is a 3-star. So they're probably going to start immediately and fill those positions. And then you have Sawyer Robinson, who just transferred recently, who may compete with Blake Shapen for the starting job. He was a Mississippi State player and then transferred over. He didn't play much at Mississippi State. So I believe there's going to be some quarterback competition there. We talked about Craig Williams, that loss, but I don't think that's a huge loss when you have a guy like Richard Reese and the season he has had as a true freshman. I believe he won Freshman of the Year in the Big 12. I think he's going to have another outstanding year for the Bears. And then you have Monterey Baldwin, Hal Presley. Hal Presley had almost 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. Baldwin had 500 yards, 4 touchdowns. So you're bringing back 2 guys who had quality numbers from last year. Yeah, it's not 1,000 yards, but both of those guys got enough playing time last year where they know the system. They have experience at the big collegiate level in the Big 12. So I mean, I think their offense will be fine. Their defense may have some question marks. I mean, you lost Micah Muscool, I'm not how to pronounce his name. You lost your best DB in Al Walcott, and then you lost Lorando Johnson. You brought in Isaiah Dunson from Miami. You brought in Byron Bonds from Utah State, and then Trevin Mai from Oregon. And then you bring over the defensive coordinator from Oregon and Matt Polich.
Yeah, I think that's how you say it, yeah.
And I mean, Oregon had a decent defense last year. I believe they had the best defense in the Pac-12, if not the best, the second best. I might be getting them mixed up with Utah, but they either had number one or number two defense in the Pac-12, and the Big 12 plays no defense. So I think bringing him over to a defense that was number one or number two, like I said, in the Pac-12, I think it's going to translate. When you look at the recruiting, they had the 35th overall class in the 2023 class. They were 5th out of 10 in the Big 12, which is in the middle of the road. But again, the Big 12 is so wide open to me that any team can win it. You saw Kansas last year pop on the scene out of nowhere. So I think Baylor can.
TCU.
Yeah, even TCU. So I think Baylor could do that. They only had 2 4-star recruits in this class, highlighted by the offensive tackle Isaiah Robinson and LeVar Thornton Jr. They had 19 3-stars. So I think kind of similar to what we said in the Nebraska video, I think this is going to be a highlight year for Baylor. If they can kind of break on the scene and compete for a Big 12 title. I know I've said that about like 3 or 4 Big 12 teams this year. But again, that just comes to the point of me saying that the Big 12 is so wide open and anybody could really win it. But moving into their schedule, so Dad, I'll let you give your prediction first, and why you chose floor, ceiling in the final prediction.
Yeah, so the first thing is, I think I picked 4 teams that I think are just going to be a little bit better. That UCF game was a toss-up for me. And as we preview UCF has always been a tough team. Obviously, this is the team, the self-proclaimed national champions a couple years ago. The Cincinnati game was tough for me. But there were games that I think are easy wins. Honestly, I think this is a really good looking schedule for them. They should be good against Texas State. I didn't even know that Long Island had a university. So the fact that they have Long Island University on their schedule, I didn't know that was a team that existed.
It's almost as bad as the Campbell Camels.
Yeah, Campbell, the Camels. What is? I didn't even know. I got to look up the Long Island University mascot. But this kind of goes to my floor. Now there's some games I picked them in, and again, a big part of that was what they had returning. Right, I think chemistry, continuality is big in college football. So when you're bringing back your starting quarterback, your starting running back, I think that means something. So I think those are the things that I think are going to help carry them over Texas Tech, Cincinnati. The Iowa State game is tough. The Kansas State game I went back and forth with. That's a game that I kind of went back and forth with in my mind. TCU and West Virginia is an up and down team that every now and then shocks somebody. So yeah, I have them beating those teams. I have them at 8-4, but that also explains my floor being at 6-6, because I think a couple of those games they could drop.
Yes, and I mean we agreed on the Utah, Texas, and the TCU game. I gave them the edge over UCF. I think Baylor's going to be a little bit better than them this year, but I can see that going either way. I have their floor at 7-5. I think they could lose to Utah, Texas, UCF, Kansas State, and TCU. That's where I had my floor capped out, and I don't think they can beat Utah or Texas, and that's why I have them at 10-2. But my final prediction is 9-3. And just to kind of revisit this last slide before I forget, and the comment section grills us for this. They did bring over Dominic Richardson. He was a starting running back for Oklahoma State. He had 500 yards, 8 touchdowns. So I think him and Reese are going to be a good dynamic duo in the backfield. They lost Craig Williams, but I think bringing him over kind of helps that void, I guess if you want to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then they brought over Keatron Jackson. He's a former 4-star recruit, a wide receiver from Arkansas. Yeah, Arkansas. So, I mean, I think pairing him with Baldwin and Presley, I think the receiver room should be decent. Now, it might not be the best in the Big 12 or the best in the country, but, I mean, I think the offense is going to be sufficient enough to win more than 6 games or go 6-7. So I would say that they're going to have a better year this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree, and for those very same reasons, I like what they're bringing back in their receiving core. I like the fact that Blake, and again Chapin, however you say his name, um, and he didn't have a bad season. I think he had 18 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Again, I'm not saying he was great, but you're talking about at that time a redshirt sophomore who threw for almost 3,000 yards and is coming back. And it's coming back, like I said, with a bunch of players that he played with last year. So Baldwin, their number one receiver, is back. They did lose Holmes, but yeah, I mean they're bringing back. We talk about Presley, right? Their number three receiver back. You throw in Jackson. They really are kind of bringing back probably the same amount of talent, and again, just a year of productivity better. So I think they're going to be a tough out. Again, I do think they're going to lose some games, but I think they're going to be a tough out.